thoughtful ideas and suggestions for guests and topics.
Great events, programs, and factors all the countries and listen to
Welcome to this week's segment of Dialogue Houston. I'm your host, Lawrence Payne. To our regular viewing audience, welcome. To those joining us perhaps for the first time here for HCCTV Dialogue Houston, we now come to you every Tuesday and Thursday at 6 a.m. and again at 6 p.m. on Saturday afternoons at 3 p.m. and can be found now on the Cube, KQUBE on Saturday morning, Channel 57 at 6:30 a.m. As always, on top of the hour, let me thank you very much for your calls, emails, and text messages concerning previous shows that we've aired, but always your thoughtful ideas for guest topics and subjects to be covered on upcoming segments of Dialogue Houston, because after all, this is your community affairs, public affairs show. I have a great show planned for you today. We are so blessed to have a face that many of you will know and a name you'll recognize also. We have the former president of the University of Houston downtown with us, Dr. Bill Flores. And I wanted to have Dr. Flores on because he has been such a champion in higher education for these many, many years. He now is the wonderful Associate Vice Chancellor at Antioch University in Santa Barbara, California. I told him he just went from Texas to California so he could keep his tan. And so it really is a great pleasure to have him here. As you know, we are blessed when he was here with us in Houston as the president of UH Downtown for all the great work that he did and the great changes that took place under his great leadership during this era at UH Downtown, one of the most diverse universities in this country, and really working hard to reach every urban child, every student, to make sure that they were able to succeed with their college education. It's such a pleasure to have you here, Dr. Flores, and welcome.
Thank you so much, Larry.
You know, so we've been wanting to do this, and we never quite got to do it when you were down the road, but so great to have you here. And I really want to say again, what you did while your tenure as the president of UH Downtown, University of Houston Downtown, to turn that university into one of the most fascinating examples of what an urban, truly diverse, pluralistic university could act like, feel like, and be like in service to all students was a remarkable thing.
Thank you, Larry. And it wasn't just me, of course.
Great team, of course.
Faculty, staff, students. But, you know, I think when you've got a university as it is, sitting right downtown, it makes no sense not to be engaged with the downtown.
Yeah.
And to bring the faculty and staff and students together with public agencies and community organizations to try to work together to solve problems that confront the Houston residents.
Right.
And that's what we did.
And you made urban come alive, both from the sense of the things that go with urban, social, economic, political realities, but also the urban from the business and the community piece being wedded together.
And I think that in reflecting on it, because, you know, when I arrived at the University of Houston downtown, it was a very good school, but it was open admissions and had very high dropout rates.
Right.
Often in the first semester, students
Right.
would come in that just weren't prepared for college, and they wouldn't make it, and often left with a lot of debt, and very few classes they would get credit for. So what we started to do was look at, working with the system, ways of adding admission standards, but without changing the diversity of the campus.
Right, right.
And in fact, making it more diverse. Right. And we did that. But also, we developed excellent academic programs and began to develop new ones. So not only the programs that we had, but creating conditions so that new ones, such as in the STEM fields, we developed a behavioral health sciences degree in working with industry, working with nonprofits, a master's in nonprofit management, MBA, and many other degrees.
But at the time you came to U of H was the time when higher education was really changing in many ways.
Absolutely.
And you were telling me when I had a little bird in my ear just reminded me, you were on Dialogue Houston when you first, right after you got here. But I remember you telling me at that time, because you came from as being Deputy Secretary of the New Mexico Higher Ed Department, well, a lot was happening and changing in the whole area of higher ed. So when you got to U of H, it was a great time to look at those changes and how to implement them in a situation like UH downtown.
Well, and I think what is happening today in higher education is it's accelerated. What I saw then was that we were going to see more and more cuts in state support and financial aid, and more restrictions and also requirements for reporting, and all of those have happened.
Yes,
and
and then some, huh?
And then some, exactly.
Right.
And it's made it very difficult because you're responding to both the federal government, the state government.
Right.
There's more and more regulations and fewer dollars. You have to raise tuition, and it affects the ability of students to come, parents to support them, and of course you have growing indebtedness as well.
And with all of that, you understand very clearly that because, first of all, your PhD is in social theory and public policy, you understand very clearly how these things intersect and connect together, and one has to be able to see the big picture of how these things relate and connect, because if you don't, you're going to be looking at one aspect while the other aspect, as the old people would say, are biting you over here. You're focused over here, right?
That's right.
And it becomes a very challenging thing. Higher ed, it is a very multifaceted piece. It's not just the academics and the pedagogy and all that we think about when we think about education. It's all those other aspects that you have to be very aware of.
And I have been, and I was when I was president of the University of Houston downtown, but going back from the time I was in Cal State Northridge, or executive vice president at New Mexico State University, I've been involved at the national level in higher education. I'm on the governing board and actually will be elected chairman at the next meeting of the Hispanic Association of Colleges and Universities.
Okay.
I've served on many commissions for ACE and for several other national and statewide higher education bodies. And what that has done is it's given me a sense of what's happening on the national panorama, and try to take that then to enhance the learning and opportunities for our students, and prepare the faculty and staff so that we're one step ahead before the changes come down.
And that's important because demographically, we're changing as a nation, as a state, here in Texas and Houston particularly, and the whole understanding of how the Latino Hispanic student, their role, their needs, their concerns fit into the larger concerns, since they are the predominant population in many areas here in Houston, also becomes very important because it's an equity question as much as it is anything else, is it not?
Well, it is, and one of the things that I'm proud that we were able to achieve during the 6.5 years of my tenure as president at the University of Houston downtown is that we flipped the A, B, and C and DFW rate. Because in core courses like algebra and English, and even in history and other courses, we had students that were 70% of them were flunking or getting D's or having to withdraw, sometimes taking it 2 or 3 times. And by reworking the way the courses were taught, by having more interaction, applied learning, supplemental instruction, and tutoring and other things, we then got 70% that have A, B's, and C's, and higher, depending upon the course. So that's first. But second is that we got nationally recognized as having the biggest economic boost to students, bigger than Rice University or many other universities in Houston. And Washington Monthly recognized us. We had a situation where we got the President's Honor Roll for community engagement and Carnegie classification, one of only 5 in Texas to get that classification.
But it started, as you said a minute ago, with taking each student individual into consideration, their learning style, their needs, their way of disseminating information and knowledge, and adapting and making that change to be able to do it in a way that allowed them to succeed.
And also, I believe, in engagement, high impact practices, the ability to work closely with faculty on problem solving, so they understand the concepts much better, much deeper. And then in addition, they did undergraduate research, they did service learning, They got involved in solving
Yes,
problems.
they did. They were everywhere in the community.
And
Yeah.
as a result, much more motivated to learn.
But it all, to me, ends up being what you said is you created that crucible around them.
That's
The
right.
undergirding, nurturing bubble that allowed them to succeed. Whatever it took, we're going to help them and nurture and help them succeed. Because it was really about retention, not only getting them there, figuring out a way to make sure we kept them there.
And I think working with parents, foundations, community organizations, because just as we're trying to improve learning in the school, we're trying to make certain that the learning that our students in college have is applied learning that they can take to wherever they go, so that they get the critical thinking skills, problem-solving ability, the opportunity to work in teams. And that's what you need in,
Right.
in the 21st century, whatever career you go into.
And you've always talked about a career rather than a job.
That's right.
That you're really preparing people for lifelong learning that moves into a career that then you can grow in that career, but you've got to keep preparing yourself along the stages
Absolutely.
and never stop. We're going to take a small pause and break, and you can see where we're headed in the second part when we come back with Dr. Flores. What is the future of higher ed? What is the future of higher ed in a changing demographic society? What do we mean when we talk about diversity? It's not the same thing when we say diversity back then as diversity now. It really is about pluralism. How do we live and work and thrive together in a pluralistic society? And what does that look like from an educational standpoint of how we begin to reshape and rethink some of the things we're doing? We'll be right back.
We look at consumer arts and sciences, and we're looking at the creative economies of Houston. The consumer arts and sciences is just that. We deliver services for the greater Houston area. Our faculty and staff are industry experts, and so they have worked closely with their industry partners, whether it's cosmetology, hair design, fashion design, interior design, merchandising, and our culinary arts program. Now our industry partners know exactly who to go to.
I come from a big family. I'm the oldest of 6. To me, being the first person to go to college, it's like setting a standard, you know? My little brother is 8 years old now. I challenge his curiosity. I challenge him to dream. I have to paint a picture for him that he can look up to and live up to and possibly be better than. My name is Jaquez, and I am your dividend.
If you have a passion for anything, whether it is running a law firm, a hospital, a college, manufacturing aircraft parts, or composing music, whatever it is, and you want to do that as your livelihood, you will have to know something about business. The Business Center of Excellence is made up of 8 major programs of study. Each of these programs provides you with the knowledge, skills, and abilities needed in the workplace. Come join us. We are open for business.
I'm only 17, but I know about investing. Believe in something, buy shares in it, watch it grow. So, what if you could invest in the future? The future of kids, like a stock. Not the kind of stock that's about making money, but a stock for social change. A whole new kind of investment called Better Futures. When you invest, it helps kids go to college. I could be one of the first college graduates from my family, the first philanthropist from my neighborhood. And if I'm the first, then maybe there's a second and a third. Believe in us, invest in us, watch us grow. My name is Sydney, and I'm your dividend.
Media and visuals and audio is how we communicate in this world today. Students need to understand how to create that content, how to discuss that content, and distribute it around the world.
The Center of Excellence for Media, Arts, and Technology comprises 4 different areas. We have audio production, filmmaking, music business, and our digital communications program. We're going to teach you the skills that you're going to need to go out and go to work in the workforce.
Welcome back. You've been with us for the first part of the show. You know, we're having a fascinating conversation with our good friend, Dr. Bill Flores, who is now the Associate Chancellor at Antioch University in Santa Barbara, California. But before that, you all know him as a former president of our wonderful U of H downtown for 6.5 years and did a great, wonderful job as a servant leader there, and the same role he's doing now in Antioch to really help students succeed, because in the end of the day, that's what it's all about. You know, we were talking right before the break about the future of higher ed, particularly in the urban setting, and I'm sure now that you're at Antioch, you're addressing that there as well. But that's going to be a real issue, because you cannot disconnect those two together. Higher ed and the urbanness, or the urban side, and what does that really look like, feel like, and act like in reality?
Well, you know, Antioch University is a national university.
Yes.
So we serve urban communities like Los Angeles, Seattle, Santa Barbara, but also rural communities in Vermont.
Yeah, you're in the middle of the,
and in Yellow Springs, Ohio.
Right.
So you've got residential campuses and community campuses. But I think the thing that drew me to this opportunity is I have a chance to work both in charge of a one campus, which is Santa Barbara, but also on the national level to help build programs nationally. And Antioch is interesting because it is a nonprofit that was founded in 1852 by one of the founders of public education, Horace Mann, who wanted a school that really became a model, because it was one of the first in the country to be fully integrated with African Americans, whites, men and women standing side by side.
And that was mandatory, right?
That was in the time before the Civil War, 1852. It's phenomenal.
Yep. And we have a lot of great Antioch graduates here in Houston.
That's right.
Actually, because I ran into some just recently. But because of Antioch's foundation and the way it began in his history, and because it is across the nation, it allows, I'm sure, everyone involved with it to see this thing in a much larger scope. And I guess there are some aspects and pieces that are the same, obviously, but different depending on the different locations that you reside.
Well, and I think particularly in urban universities, urban settings, we have a responsibility to address the issues that affect our community. So whether it's in Houston, Los Angeles, any city, because they're going to be different. Everybody has education problems. Everybody, some have more crime than others. Some have problems with discrimination or police community relationships, as we've seen with the Black Lives Matter movement and so many other things that are going on. I think what's a commonality is universities, they don't want to be that ivory tower. They recognize that for their future, but also for the better of the community, the engagement of faculty, trying to address the issues that affect the community, it helps the reputation of the university, but more importantly, it prepares the students for the future. And really, when you think about what universities should be, it's not just about jobs and careers, it's about democracy and about preparing citizens for the future.
So from that standpoint of a university, and particularly the great urban universities around this country, preparing citizens for living as a citizen in democracy, what does that mean? We've done a lot on this show about that, the 5 tenets of a citizen in a democracy, not only individual rights and privileges, but our duties, obligations, responsibilities to each other, not just the I and me, but the we and us. So the question, I think, that's becoming more and more, even here in Houston, quite frankly, universities, particularly in the urban settings, regardless of which university we're talking about, used to be seen as think tanks for the community. In that faculty members would write what we'd call occasional papers around subjects and issues that are impacting the community. You don't see a lot of that anymore.
Well, I mentioned before, I'm on some national councils. One of them is the Kettering Foundation has brought together presidents of universities to address this issue. How do we encourage...
Kind of a turning outward thing.
Public intellectuals. And how are we to be stewards of place, but also stewards of democracy? Because in many respects, universities, we can't just be job mills where we're training people for jobs, because the careers and industries change and their needs change. But the need for democracy, for civil society, the strengthening of the fabric of civil society, that's critical. And so Kettering and others, I'm also involved in the Points of Light and their national conference on service. And we're actually bringing the two together later this
wonderful.
year so that we can bring volunteerism and community engagement with universities to dialogue on how do we encourage community engagement and democracy
Right.
at the local level and at the university level.
Because I do think a lot of it is getting out of that I and me into the we and us thing. And I think when you talk about it from a democracy standpoint, living in a democracy as a citizenship, the rights and privileges of citizen, we love that one, but it's always all about the other three, our common duties, obligations, responsibilities. That's why when I think when you look at the demographic shift, that becomes even more important now.
That's right.
Because we have to look at we and us, because you can't be talking about us and them.
You know, one of the things that I love about Houston, it's the most diverse city in America. And, you know, UHD was one of the most diverse universities. But you cannot go anywhere in Houston and without seeing people from every nationality, every different ethnic group and faith. And we interact together. We're all community members.
Right.
And we have a long history of working together and problem solving. And I think that that's something that other cities have yet to work through. As the country is really becoming more diverse, other cities that have not dealt with that before are seeing their populations change.
Right.
And we're seeing also, unfortunately, nativism rising. We see it in the national level with the presidential
Very
candidate.
much divided, yes.
And it's unfortunate because we've polarized rather than finding common ground. And I think that that's what we in higher education we must do. We encourage people to see that there are other opinions, to find their own, but to also respect the opinion of others. And I think that's critical for our society and for their educational development.
And higher ed can play that role in some ways better than anyone else as almost a third-party neutral mediating institution, because we're just trying to get people to think and to reflect and to meditate and to process information and education, education and the knowledge, knowledge and the wisdom, wisdom and the action, and do something.
And you know, I know you're Catholic, you know, I see Pope Francis and as not only as a spiritual leader, but as someone who's playing that role. And there are many others who are doing the same thing. You know, the Dalai Lama, the same thing. Asking others to think beyond themselves and beyond their religious affiliation or their political affiliation, and what's best for the world and for humanity.
And social justice is part of that discussion.
That's exactly
and
right.
as a fellow Catholic, you understand those tenets and the social teachings of when it comes to social justice. But I was even amazed with our new superintendent who's coming for HISD, Richard Carenza, coming to us from San Francisco. In his title when he was Deputy Superintendent in San Francisco, this was his title, the Deputy Superintendent of Instructions, Innovation, and Social Justice.
I love that.
Now, I've never seen anybody in public ed with that word in their title.
Right.
And and he's been here just a few days, but he's very clear already on the issue of it has to be a discussion about equity. We're not going to get where we need to go until we can have that honest dialogue and conversation about what equity really looks like. Not equality, what equity really looks like.
And I think that unfortunately, a lot of us in higher ed and in public ed have, maybe because of the bureaucracy, fear in the political realm that we may lose our job. Some have lost their voice.
Yes.
And we need to find it. We need to express it and to say, we're going to play a role to make a difference in society and to help our students to play that role, to make this a better country and a better world.
Like Flores, you know, you're hitting on the pieces of the component, because even when you touched on a minute ago the Black Lives Matter movement, and I always say it, I've said this on this show and other things that I've done since the movement was started, 2 years now, actually, second year anniversary just passed. It's a shame that you have to do that, because what Black Lives Matter says is that the little word that we don't talk, Black Lives Matter also. There's an also attached to the last part of that. And what I think we have to get to is that all human beings' lives matter. All human beings' lives matter. That's it. No discussion, not white lives, black lives, blue lives, police lives, all human beings. But having said that, not individuals, not persons, when this is part of that whole thing that we were just talking about. When you elevate the individual person to the status of a human being, which is where they should be, that becomes a larger ethical discussion, does it not?
That's
because
right.
if we're treating everyone as a fellow human being, the essence of human beingness, we've just elevated that person, that individual, to where they rightly belong in a dialogue.
And that we understand that the only race that matters is the human race.
Yeah, it's about the humanity. It's even about citizenship. You can't get to humanity and citizenship in a democracy until you see and treat everyone as an equal from a humanities standpoint.
That's right. And I think as we educate students and lift their thinking, we want to solve problems locally but also globally. And the local becomes a path to understanding this global society that we live in. I think we also have a duty to take them to other places in the world.
Yes.
Engage them so they can understand this global society that we live in and come back and be better leaders in this.
And getting folk out of their normal little
That's right.
circles. I mean,
That's
I think it's all about the relationships that have to be established, built on mutual trust and respect.
That's right.
Because nothing happens without trust, right?
Well,
if we don't know each other, we don't have relationships of mutual
That's
trust and
right.
respect. We don't know each other, we don't trust each other. Nothing happens without trust.
Thank you. I agree
Right?
with that.
And
Very
so
much
we got to get folk going because, just to finish it, because you and I have talked about this on air, off the air with other groups of people, the relationships of mutual trust and respect allows me to then to talk about commitment and accountability to and for each other.
Mm-hmm.
If I have the first and second part, I can talk about the third part, which is now what our action and behaviors are and should be for and to each other. Because I think that's the piece that U of H downtown did so well that you talked about. We went from the academic, we went to the community service, we went to the outreach, we went to the service, and it made that full circle in getting it back to how the holistic approach of dealing intrinsically with intentionality and mindfulness with human beings is not just the academic, it's the social, it's the emotional, it's all of that, is it not?
It is. And when I made a decision to go to Antioch, I was reading about its founder, Horace Mann, and he was asked before he died, what can you tell young people today? And this was back in the turn of the century. And he says, be afraid of dying without having made this world a better place.
Wow. Be afraid of dying without having made this world a better place. He didn't realize, but we're out of time. That was a great sentence to end on. Dr. Flores, I want to thank you very much for being on Dialogue Houston. We're going to continue to follow your work not only at Antioch University in California, but the stuff you're doing on the national boards and committees you serve on. We look forward to having you on again in the future, and I want to thank you for being here. Bless you and
Thank you, as
good work
always.
as we go forward. Dr. Flores is also the co-editor of a wonderful journal, Latino Cultural Citizenship, Claiming Identity, Space, and Rights. It fits into this whole thing of where we are with the demographic shifts. We got to get out of here, they're telling me, so it's time to go. Again, thank you, Dr. William Flores, for being our guest this week. And until we see you next week here on Dialogue Houston, as always, peace, power, and love.